For today's project, we are going to be aerospace engineers and build a wind tunnel. Our wind tunnel will channel air to make a cotton ball float inside. Now that we know what we're making, let's make sure that we have all of our materials ready. For this project, you will need one 6-volt motor, one 4-blade propeller, two AA batteries, a AA battery holder, a cardboard box with a lid, and it should have a hole cut into the top, 3 inches of copper strip tape, 2 cotton balls, 1 pair of chopsticks, 1 double-sided square, and then outside of your project bag, you will also need a sheet of cardstock paper, scissors, and some tape. Once you have all of your materials ready, we can start building our project. First, let's grab our motor and our propeller. You should see a hole on the back of the propeller and be able to fit it onto the end of the motor. However, you may need to press pretty hard to keep it in place, and you might want to use the table in your hand to do it. Next, we're going to grab our AA battery holder. Ensure that there are no batteries inside and that the switch is flicked to off for safety. This will ensure that we are safe while working with our electrical components and that nothing gets electrocuted. Next, we're going to grab our copper tape strip and rip off about a 1/2 inch at the end. It doesn't have to be exact. And then peel back the copper tape about halfway, like so. And then use the sticky side to connect the red wire on the battery pack to the red wire on the motor. So this red wire. I'm going to fold over the copper tape and then remove the rest of the backing. And then twist this tightly around these wires. Now repeat this step with more copper tape and the other 2 wires, the 2 black wires. And then when you're done, your motor assembly should look like this. Next, we're going to grab our cardboard box, and I'll place this off to the side, to see that your cardboard box should already have a hole that's cut into the top. So we're going to grab our assembly, and we're going to place the wires into this hole so that they go in and then come out on both sides. And you'll see what I mean. You can see that our wires go into the hole and they come out for our motor and for our battery pack. Next, we're going to push the wires in a little bit further, and you're going to push the motor into this opening. When you do so, ensure that it stays in place, but make sure that some of the wires stay out because these connections here are fragile. So don't push it in with the wire all the way in like this. Instead, take some of the wires out and place it in like so, making sure not to break those connections. If your motor is too big to fit into this hole, we can also expand it with our scissors, like so. Just to make the hole a little bit bigger. But when we're doing this, we want to ensure that the motor stays in place so that it kind of gets stuck into this hole. So I'll push my wires up, back in. There we go. After you do this, your full assembly should look like this. You can see that I did end up pushing the wires all the way in because it stays a little bit better like that. But again, just make sure that those connections onto the motor don't get broken. As well as pushing it in tightly like this, you can also use some tape to secure the motor in place so that it doesn't fall over, and also so that the wires don't come up towards the propeller and get in the way of it spinning. And when put together, your box should look like this. Next, we're going to grab our cardstock paper, and you want to roll the paper so that the diameter right here is just a bit bigger than the width or the diameter of our propeller. So I'm going to kind of expand it so it's just about the size of the propeller, which is basically the whole piece of cardstock for me. And then you just want to tape the cardstock paper rolled at this diameter. So I'll place some tape onto the side of the paper, roll it back to that diameter, and tape it in place. And do the same thing at the bottom. And this is going to act as our tunnel, so make sure the tape seals it pretty well so that no air escapes. Okay. Then you're going to take your chopsticks and go ahead and snap off one of the chopsticks. And we're going to tape this to the bottom of our cardstock paper with a decent amount of the chopstick sticking off. If you want to get it exact, place the chopstick next to your box like this, and then measure it so that your cardstock paper sits just above where the propeller is, and that's about where you want to tape it onto the roll that we just made. So I'll place 2 pieces of tape there like that to secure that in place. Make sure it is as straight as possible. All right, so now that we've got our cardstock paper attached, we're actually going to secure it to one of the long ends of our box, and you want it to sit with the cardstock paper just above where the propeller is. You also want to make sure that there's enough clearance for the propeller to spin, and then it's not hitting the bottom of the paper or the chopstick when it does so. And we're going to be taping it again to one of the longer sides of our box, not the shorter sides. So I'll do that now with some more tape. And I'm going to rotate it so that it sits directly above the propeller. And again, I'm going to add another piece of tape to secure it in place. All right. And then the final step here, once we've got everything attached, is to add our 2 AA batteries into our battery holder. Again, when doing this, make sure that the battery holder is turned off before inserting them. And then with that, we are ready to test. Now that we're done building, let's test our wind tunnel. To test, simply flick the switch on your battery pack to on. You should see your propeller start spinning, and it's going to suck in air from the bottom of the wind tunnel, and you're going to feel it blow the air out of the top. Next, grab one of your cotton balls and place it into your wind tunnel. And if you look inside, you should see the cotton ball moving around and kind of dancing through the wind tunnel. Yeah, mine is pretty close to the center. And if I turn it off, you'll see that my cotton ball falls back down to the bottom here. So if your wind tunnel does not work, there are some things you can try. First, if the cotton ball falls all the way down to the wind tunnel and hits the propeller, you may need to pull off some of the cotton to make it lighter, which will cause it to float back to the top. Do this slowly with small amounts at a time until you get it floating kind of in the center of your wind tunnel. If your propeller is hitting the top of the tube or your box, you may need to move the motor up or down, or move the chopstick to give some more room to spin. And if the propeller does not spin at all, you can first check that the batteries are inserted correctly. And if they are, you may need to check your copper tape connections or those very fragile connections on the motor itself. If the copper tape has come undone, you can redo it with another strip, but if the connections have come off of the motor itself, you may need to test with another motor and be extremely careful when inserting it into the hole, and make sure that the hole in the top of the box is large enough for that motor to fit in, or else those small connections may snap off. You can also reapply copper tape to all points if it's not working, just in case, making sure that the silver parts of the wires are making contact. Now that we are done testing, let's talk about how our wind tunnel works. Here we are using a property called air resistance to force a cotton ball to float inside of our tube. First, we are drawing air in from the bottom with our propeller and then pushing that air quickly up in one direction. Next, this air is going to come into contact with our cotton ball, which is sitting inside of the tube. And air itself is not nothing. It is made of stuff. So when you walk through air, you feel the wind in your hair, or if you move your hand around, you feel that stuff hitting you. And so these are molecules of air that are moving around, and when these molecules hit our cotton ball, they push it up, forcing it further up inside of the wind tunnel. And this force of air pushing back on something is called air resistance. The more air which bumps into something, the more air resistance that thing will have. And in our wind tunnel, we want to optimize the amount of air resistance that our cotton ball has in order to make it float in the middle of the tube. If there is too much air resistance, the cotton ball will be picked up further by the air and it may fly out of the top. But if there is not enough air resistance and too much weight, the cotton ball may sink to the bottom and hit the propeller. We also must change the weight of the cotton ball instead of just how much air is hitting it, since that is an easier way to kind of tune in the balance between weight and air resistance. Now that we know how our wind tunnel works, there are a few things that we can talk about, such as what else could we test in a wind tunnel? What things affected the air resistance on our cotton ball? How could we make our cotton ball float more, or how could we get it to float less? How could we get air to move faster inside of our tunnel? And how could we make a bigger wind tunnel to test larger objects?